Hello, my dear friends. How are you? I hope I find you all in good health and safe and sound. Welcome. Thank you for joining me here. I'm Ari Theriger, and today I'll be talking about the celebration of Ostara to give my own contribution to the subject, which I think I've never actually spoke of the celebration itself, and there isn't much to speak about it actually. But anyway, I'll briefly have a quick talk concerning this pagan celebration. I actually had another video scheduled for today, but then I remembered this celebration is close at hand, right? So I have rescheduled the other video for next week, which is about the esoteric origins of the runes, a continuation of that subject. Well then, in the past I've made a video concerning the spring goddess Eostre. There are two different ways to pronounce her name. On that video, it was actually focusing on the historical legitimacy of this goddess, if indeed she was a pagan goddess, or has been a pagan goddess, or a neo-pagan assumption. If you have the time, I do suggest you watch that video, please. I maintain what I've said on that video, I think. I don't remember at least half of what I've said at this point, because I don't actually watch my own stuff, my own videos. I can't be arsed. I already recorded the videos, edit them, and then I still have to watch them again to make the subtitles here on YouTube, so it's at least twice more than I would like in terms of watching what I do. I don't like hearing my own voice. Anyway, as I said, you can either pronounce Istra or Eostre or Ustra. And aside from those pronunciations, you do see and hear quite a lot of people trying to pronounce it as close as possible to the celebration of Easter to forcibly create a connection between the pagan goddess with the judeo-Christian celebration. And as I've pointed out in that previous video, a more correct pronunciation would be Eostre, closer to the Anglo-Saxon root, and the pronunciation of Ostara is probably more correct, with an emphasis on the first vowel, closer to the modern German Osten, for the celebration of Easter. Only in German and English the Judeo-Christian celebration is called Osten and Easter, respectively. This may indeed have to do with a goddess of a similar name, maybe, perhaps, but not because the celebration was originally dedicated to her or to a goddess and then adopted by Christianity or incorporated in the Christian religious celebratory calendar in Anglo-Saxon and Germanic context, but rather originally a Judeo-Christian celebration which added pagan elements all over Europe, and in Anglo-Saxon and Old German context also brought in a goddess, maybe, not just to facilitate the conversion by having old pagan elements incorporated into the Christian liturgical calendar, but also to continue with old celebratory festivities in order to create a yearly calendar full of celebrations to keep people occupied and happy, by also continuing to give life to old traditions people were more familiar with within the agrarian calendar. Everywhere else in Europe, the Easter celebration is actually called some variation of Poskar, or Pascha, because the origins is in the Hebrew word Pascha, and it is originally a Jewish celebration, then incorporated into the Christian liturgical calendar, and thus it spread all over Europe through Christianization. So, in terms of any possible connection with a goddess in Anglo-Saxon and Old German contexts, it's because the goddess itself was an element added to the original Judeo-Christian celebration, right? But, as pointed out in that previous video, the goddess itself and her historical presence in a pagan context is extremely difficult to determine, and there are no concrete evidences concerning any celebration to this goddess, or indeed, if indeed such a goddess even existed. And speaking of that, I take the opportunity to also point out that due to one of the pronunciations of this supposed goddess being Istra, many have often linked this goddess to the Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian goddess Ista, But as also pointed in another video I've made, Eostre or Eostre has nothing to do with the goddess Ista. That's an old video, by the way, but the content is still relevant. The only thing I have to add is that back then, and as I've pointed out in that video, I said that the case of sacred prostitution may have been an exaggeration or as a slur from the part of ancient Greek historians. However, in the meantime, it seems indeed that in ancient Sumer, sacred prostitution was indeed a thing, as more evidences have surfaced. So that's just one note. Anyway, the point here is that many of the modern associations, mind you, many of the modern associations between Ostara and Easter traditions stem from the 19th century writings of Jacob Grimm on the topic. And as here spoken many times before, especially on the video I've done about this idea of a great goddess, especially linked to witchcraft and such, well, such ideas and many more from the part of Jacob Grimm and others, of course, were pure assumptions, many times fantasies as well, and quite a bit of misinterpretations, mostly to forcibly connect elements that have never had anything to do with each other, just the same way it has been done within neo-paganism, including with the goddess Eostre and associations between Ostara and Easter. But anyway, concerning Ostara, it is a festival of springtime, that much is clear. Usually celebrated by many today at the time of the spring equinox, falling between the 19th and the 22nd of March each year. The overall theme of this celebration, observed by many pagans today, is that of new beginnings, new life, fertility and renewal, which is fitting given the time of the year. It is understandable, right? One of the times of the year when the nights and days are of equal length, and so Ostara heralds the shift towards longer, lighter days, the beginning of new cycles of life observed in nature, and so on and so forth. Flowers, eggs, and rabbits are all strongly associated with modern Ostara and its celebrations. No doubt that in pre-Christian times, surely people would have some sort of celebration at this time of the year, probably, most likely, especially under the agrarian animistic calendar. The importance of the cognitive landscape, that is, what is observed in nature, often bear a considerable weight on the lives of many and how living beings behave towards natural changes and the cycles of nature and life. So this creates a cognitive understanding towards such changes, which by itself created traditions, rituals, cultures, language even. And the more natural cyclical changes affect a community in the manner in which they interact with the natural world and how this affects behavior, the more a community will create mechanisms of connection and understanding towards that which has influence upon them, upon us all, upon the human community. Now, Ostara, or Eostre, is believed by many to be the goddess of this festival and holds significance for many modern pagans in their celebrations at this time of the year, right? Ideas about the goddess include origins as an ancient goddess of the dawn or a fertility goddess, though her biggest association is with the bringing of spring. The usual themes, right? But I think the real question here is, what were the origins of this popular goddess? Certainly popular in modern times. Well, as pointed out before in the previously mentioned videos and in this video already, and it's never enough. I think it's never enough to mention this. And if you are like me and you can't be asked, many won't watch the previous video. So, well, the only historical, mind you, the only historical reference to Eostre comes from the writings of Church Father Bede. He refers to the old name for April, Östermånath or Östermånatta, and his assumption that it marked the celebration of a Germanic goddess of that name. There's really no other evidences concerning this and anything to back this up, aside from, of course, the writings of the 19th century folklorist Jacob Grimm, which helped to further perpetuate and popularize Bede's idea. Concerning this supposed goddess, historically, archaeologically, etymologically, anthropologically speaking, and so on and so forth, there's just nothing before Bede, and there's a gap between Bede and Jacob Grimm. Jacob Grimm himself relying on Bede's assumption and making a forcible connection here that really doesn't seem to have been there, of course, until more evidences surface, if they surface at all, because, well, given the modern popularity of this supposed goddess and the connection to Easter, this has led to plenty of studies on the subject and still nothing comes up. Jacob Grimm's assumption was the first mention of the Germanic Ostara. We are talking about 19th century. And it is from his work that most ancient facts regarding the goddess actually stem from. And as mentioned, other misinterpretations and errors frequently repeated regarding Ostara and Eostre include an assumed etymological link to the word oestrogen and links with the Assyrian goddess Ishtar. Hares, eggs, and bunnies were also absent from the historical festival until amalgamated into it by Jacob Grimm, but have, thanks to the promulgation of his work, become associated with modern celebrations of Ostara. And then you see plenty of attempts to connect all sorts of modern traditions related to Easter and Christian traditions on Easter to a pagan past, when in fact it is mostly 19th century assumptions. And since my older videos concerning these subjects until now, there's still debate today over whether Bede outright invented Eostre for purposes that remain unclear. However, obviously this debate does little to diminish her popularity. I mean, a tale with origins in the 19th century tell of how the goddess was late to bring the spring one year, and as a result a small bird died, much to the grief of a little girl who found it, and so the goddess turned the poor bird into a snow hare, the magical creature delighting the child by laying rainbow-colored eggs. Each year the goddess told the girl, watch for the arrival of the snow hare, for then everyone would now know that spring had arrived. And so this modern tale became so popular in such a short period that here we are, right now, making all sorts of forcible connections and assumptions to a pagan past that never was, probably never was, and the goddess that may have indeed quite likely been an invention. I mean, on one hand, I think it is beautiful the way we humans so rapidly construct stories that we turn to celebrations. And mind you, this is not to say that all religious celebrations are modern inventions, because the great majority have indeed historical content and are the reflections of a past and present ways of thinking, and the cognitive landscape turned to tradition. And these indeed reflect many behaviors and even ritualistic and celebratory performances towards an animistic perception and how humanity inserts itself within the natural cycles and changes of the world. However, on the other hand, it is worrying how easy it is to manipulate the collective thought and introduce a new idea that in a short time is understood as having an ancestral value, and people cling so much to an illusionary idea of tradition that they are capable of creating all kinds of fantasized connections and meanings to claim for themselves the exclusivity of celebrating something. And this tells us a thing or two about our destructive behavior in this world and towards one another. Sometimes nowadays, of course, we are so astonished how people in the past were so gullible, especially in a past closer to us. My cat. But we still are, actually, pretty much, and we have always been. But this also tells us of the extreme importance of knowing the origins of things, because if anything, it helps us to minimize the chances of being led into believing all sorts of things in order to manipulate us into behaving and acting towards what those who try to manipulate us really want to achieve without compromising their lives' privileges. My dear friends, thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video, and as always, thank you for today. Until we meet again, my dear friends. There is no possible escape. Click.